Surely, at this point, you've seen Imperial Yeast's amazing selection of high-quality brewing yeasts over at imperialyeast.com. But you might not be as familiar with Imperial Yeast's special order yeast bank. In addition to their tried-and-true core strain selection, Imperial Yeast has a number of ale or lager strains, Brettanomyces, Kveik, and other yeasts available for special order. If you're looking to match a yeast strain currently in production, or just looking for something new to play with in the brew house, reach out to Imperial Yeast customer service to see what they may have in store. Special order strains are subject to a 10-liter order minimum and require a 2 to 3 week propagation time, but they might just be what you're looking for your next brew. You can get more information about Imperial Yeast's special order strains by calling 503-477-5826 or emailing customerservice@imperialyeast.com. Welcome to the Brew Lab. Brewers are constantly innovating to find new ways to improve beer flavor and aroma and to make a more consistently great product. Ingredient suppliers like John I. Haas, Yakima Valley Hops, Hopsteiner, and others are also innovating to make hop products that help make beer better. I'm your host, Cade Job, and today in the lab I'm speaking with our resident sensory scientist, Jeff Dailey, the sensory program manager at John I. Haas, and Shaelyn Maloney, brewing solutions specialist, also at Haas, about liquid hop products. When I first started brewing, there were a few liquid hop products on the market, mostly to help with bittering additions like Tetra, Rho, and even straight iso-alpha acids. And over the years, though, it seems like there's been an explosion of new hop products that can be used just about anywhere in the brewing process. And listener Glenn James wrote in a couple of months back with a show idea. He said, "Hey, Cade, can you do a show talking about all of these new liquid hop extracts? What are they? Where do they come from? How do you use them? Are there obvious benefits or disadvantages to using them? Thanks for all that you do." So, of course, I know some people that work with these liquid hop products, and Jeff and Shay were gracious enough to come on the show to do a Q&A about all of the different hop products, from bittering additions to aroma and flavor, whirlpool, dry hop, and even haze stabilizers. They also have some history of hop extracts, which, if you can believe it, date back to 1803. And Shay's got tips for how best to use these in the brewery. But first, if you haven't yet clicked the button to become a patron, why not? In addition to the feel-good vibes of helping to support the work we do here at Brewlosophy, you get access to a bunch of awesome rewards depending on the different pledge levels that you choose. You can get access to Brewlosophy contributor recipes that we've never published, new discounts each month to YakimaValleyHops.com, who, by the way, originally developed a form of liquid hop extract called the Hop Shots. And for $3 a month, you get access to a monthly live Q&A session with a special guest from the brewing industry. And that last one, to me, is really the most underrated reward. If you want to up your brewing game, it's a fantastic resource with guests like John Palmer, Gordon Strong, Tom Shellhammer, Jeff Dailey himself, and more, all on our private Patreon Facebook page. And there's a brand new guest each month, with this month's guest being the head mead maker of Moonlight Meadery, Michael Fairbrother. Are you kidding? If you want to up your brewing or even mead making game, it's a no-brainer to get access to this treasure trove of knowledge. All you have to do is become a patron by visiting patreon.com/Brewlosophy. If you're listening to this and you haven't yet left a rating or review, please do so. It's super important for us to make sure we're bringing you the content that you want, like, for example, more frequent Applying the Science episodes, but also knowing that you guys love digging into the science. I want to hear from you, so please give me your thoughts and comments about how you want the show, you want to see the show, or things you like. And please continue leaving those ratings or reviews. Again, wherever you can do so. If you haven't done it yet, please take a second to do so. All right, feedback this week is brought to you by the folks from John I. Haas, who over the last couple years have released a handful of really cool hop products like Lupamax, Incognito, and Flex, all intended to improve beer while reducing vegetal matter and thus increasing yields. And hey, thus the reason for today's episode. Well, they're excited to announce their latest 100% hop-derived product, especially made for your patio, lawnmower, or beach beers. Kettle Ready imparts smooth, light, stable bitterness and kettle hop aroma to beer while offering microbiological protection during the brewing process. This new product is easy to use and has no special dosing requirements. Plus, due to its standardized high alpha acid concentration in a light stable molecule, it gives the light stability and bitterness characteristics desired for all traditional beers, and it plays well with other Haas products, including Tetra Hop Gold, Hexa Hop Gold, and Ready Hop. For flexibility and optionality when brewing light stable beers, learn more about Kettle Ready at johnihaas.com. That's John, the letter I, Haas.com. And of course, we are going to be talking about Kettle Ready in today's show, so stay tuned for that. All right, listener Seebeck92 on Apple Podcast wrote, "The Brew Lab is the perfect podcast to really dive deep into the world of beer science. Bringing the real scholars out into view and making them accessible to the home brewer is a phenomenal resource for everyone. Cade does a great job of condensing the information into easier to follow narratives, especially when the technical jargon gets a little hard to follow. This podcast is absolutely worth a listen, even if, like me, the science goes a little over your head. Challenging yourself to learn more about this aspect of brewing will benefit you in so many ways, and Cade has made it more accessible than ever." Thank you, Seebeck92, for that awesome review. That's exactly what I hope for in doing the show, and I'm so glad that you are enjoying it, and thanks again for the awesome review. And before I start crying, I'm going to take a short break, so stick around and I'll be back in a few minutes with Jeff Dailey and Shaelyn Maloney talking about liquid hop products. One of the biggest improvements to my brewing practices was the upgrade to stainless steel, and Delta Brewing Systems offers some of the lowest prices on high-quality stainless gear, like the Firm Tank, which holds 8 gallons or 30 liters of wort, comes with a domed lid to reduce the chances of a messy blow-off, and it can hold up to 4 psi of pressure. Delta Brewing Systems also has their own line of brew kettles, as well as one of the lowest-priced all-in-one electric brew systems out there, and their prices are remarkably affordable. If you're in the market for legit stainless gear that won't break the bank, you've got to check out deltabrewingsystems.com. With the increased popularity of hop-forward beers like IPAs and pale ales, there's been a drive to find new ways to get hop flavor into beer. And to that end, there have been a lot of new liquid hop products that range from bittering to aroma and flavor, and even to maintain haze. So to figure out what all these products do and how to use them in your brewery, I'm speaking with Jeff Dailey and Shaelyn Maloney of John I. Haas. So Jeff, welcome back to the Brew Lab.
Every time I think I'm out, you pull me back in, man.
No, you can't go. You're the resident sensory scientist. Come on. It's what we pay you for. No, I'm just kidding. You wish. And Shay, welcome to your first episode of the Brew Lab.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. So liquid hop products. I mean, this was a listener requested episode, and it turns out that both of you know a thing or two about liquid hop products. Jeff, you've run Sensory, and Shay, you're kind of the applications expert there, at least as I understand. So yeah, liquid hop products. It's going to be fun, right, you guys?
Oh yeah.
It's going to be something.
It's going to be something. I like it. Well, all right. To remind everybody, so Jeff, of course, is the sensory program manager at John I. Haas. And Shay's title is Brewing Solutions Specialist. So Shay, why don't you start it off? Tell me about Brewing Solutions and what you guys do at Haas.
Yeah, so here at Haas, my role is Brewing Solutions Specialist is kind of a fancy name for technical support and applications work. So we really help answer any sort of questions that our consumers may have about any of our ingredients or products that we provide, as well as just general brewing questions. And then on the flip side, I work with our development team when we're producing new products and trying to bring stuff to market to find application uses and dosage rates and things like that for those products.
Ah, nice. Technical support and applications. So you're the perfect person to talk to. I mean, well, Jeff too, because we have to know how things taste, right? But you're like the perfect person to talk to for this, because you can talk to us about dosage rates, you know, which products to use when, common pitfalls, you know, all that sort of stuff.
I don't know about perfect, but I'll do my best.
Okay, well, that's all. Hey, that's all we expect here on the Brew Lab. I certainly am not perfect either. Cool. All right, so I guess we should jump in, unless, Jeff, there's anything new going on in your world right now.
Well, like I've talked about before, okay, we've got our Hop Flavors to America course next week, which will probably be, when this airs, it will have gone on 2 weeks prior, something like that. Yeah. But we'll be, listeners should keep their eyes peeled on our social media accounts, Haas Hops on Instagram, for future iterations of Hops Academy and Hop Flavorist.
Yeah.
It's a good time.
Yeah, that's so cool. I wish I could be there. Unfortunately, my son turns 1 that weekend, so I can't really miss his first birthday party.
How dare you prioritize your family over our friendship, Cade? Come on.
I know, right? And hops in general. Beer already runs a huge portion of my life, but in any event, yeah, that's going to be super cool. And listeners have been hearing me talk about that for months now, about hop flavorists. So yeah, I hope to attend one of those in the future. And it's pretty cool that you're getting it out off the ground. Well, let's jump into liquid hop products, and I don't know, I almost said liquid Haas products there, but I mean, kind of, but anyway, liquid hop products, and who wants to start us off? What are liquid hop products, and where do they come from?
I will take that. I'm getting the finger guns from Shay, so she's indicating, hey, my esoteric knowledge of history might come in handy here. Generally, liquid hop products are hops that have been made into a liquid. Where do they come from? Well, when a mommy hop and a daddy hop come together.
No. This is a PG podcast. No, I'm just kidding.
No, but I mean, it depends which route you want to go in terms of like the history of it versus functionally what types of hop products are out there. Generally, let's go with what types of products are out there, because there's both the standard, which takes up the bulk of the market's bittering hop products. It's, hops that have been extracted one way or the other to get out the alpha acid. Maybe I pre-isomerize it so that brewers can more efficiently produce beer. Then there's 2 branches from that. There's functional / non-traditional hop products, things that can be used that come from hops to make beers hazy, or tannin and resin and polyphenol extracts to add mouthfeel, or the beta resins that can be purified and altered down to be antibacterial in the food industry and things like that.
Yeah.
And obviously there's the final component. There's hop oil products, because alpha, beta, oil, some polyphenols, those are the major constituent of hops. So we try and find different ways of using all of them, and all of them can go into some sort of liquid solution.
Okay, interesting. So yeah, I mean, liquid hop products are literally liquid hop products, right? And coming from hops, and it is. That's the way to think about them, right? It's distilling down the major components. Maybe not distilling. I won't use that word because I don't know exactly. But it's taking those major components of hops, like you said, bittering products, the alpha acids, the beta acids, the antimicrobial, and then the oils, the aroma and flavor, and trying to make concentrated hop products out of those constituents. So then I guess, well, I mean, my next question was, why do liquid hop products exist? But that's kind of exactly what you just explained, right? I mean, liquid hop products exist because there are these components that we want from hops. And if you want to dial in just a specific thing, these can help, I guess, right? Maybe Shay, why don't you take this one? Why do liquid hop products exist, and maybe even throw in some benefits? Why would people want to use hop extracts?
Yeah, I mean, so harking back to the early days of I believe it's the early 1800s, people started investigating better ways to get more out of hops. And a liquid is definitely a little bit more concentrated than the raw hops themselves. And so for one reason or another, you would want to, it's a good way to standardize the product. It has a little bit more ability to get a homogeneous mixture. And then it also has really good stability. So raw hops, and especially whole cones, don't have a long shelf life. But if you're creating these hop products, they last a little bit longer. They're a little bit more stable. They don't require quite as much intensive resources. And then again, shipping and handling wise, it doesn't take up near as much storage. So there's a lot of really cool benefits to hop products, especially on the application side. The utilization of those alpha acids and some of those things in those liquid hop products are going to be a little higher.
Oh, interesting. I want to dig into that a little bit more whenever we get into the bittering hops, because I think that's really fascinating too. But you said a couple of things there that I didn't even really think about, right? We already pelletize, because shipping around huge bales of whole cones takes up a lot of space. I mean, I've been to the warehouse there at Haas, warehouses, right? It's not just one that has all these huge bales of hops in there. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we pelletize, but extracts then take that even a step further, right? I mean, for shipping and moving it around, and even storage inside your brewery, you don't need as much space. You've got this highly concentrated product. But the other thing that you said was standardization, and that one I think is like that to me makes a whole lot of sense, because like I look at the number of hops that I've got in my refrigerator. Let's say I've got Cascade at 5% this year, and it was 4.5% last year, or the other lot, right? 4.5% versus 5.5%. While that may be a a reasonable range for Cascade. Those are very different numbers. And so you're always trying to make some sort of adjustment on the fly. Is that kind of what you mean by standardizing, alpha acid and that sort of stuff with hop extracts?
Yes, absolutely. Not only just a flavored standardization, but also some of those key ingredients that you're saying, like keeping the alpha acids at a standard rate. And that way there's not quite as much flex in the different directions.
Yeah. Ooh, not as much flex. Don't y'all have a product called Flex? I love it.
We do. No pun intended.
Awesome. Speaking of those products like Flex, for example, this seems to have been a really big focus for product development for Haas. I mean, these liquid hop extracts have seemed like they've exploded over the past, I don't know, maybe 10 years or so. I mean, 10 years really isn't that short of a window, but it does seem to be like there loads of new products have come out in the past several years. So is this something that y'all expect to continue? Maybe Jeff, you want to tackle this one?
Yeah, it's something that's going to continue, because if you look at why liquid hop products came about, they exploded as macrobreweries expanded and wanted to have better yield and things like that. Then the IPA flavor revolution happened, and slowly but surely our research into flavor products has moved in that same direction of liquid hop products. So, and as we move beyond just the brewing space, as brewers themselves move beyond brewing to make ciders and seltzers and hop waters and all those things, they're going to be looking for different ways to get the flavors they're used to or target flavors that they want. And hopefully hops will play a major role in that.
Yeah, that's a good point. All these different flavors that hops contribute to beer. Are there other uses for them? Like you said, in cider and other beverages. That was actually a question my wife asked me the other day. She said, are hops used in anything other than beer? And I'm not sure. I mean, maybe you guys have some contracts. Jeff is nodding his head. So why don't you tell me? Yes. Okay. Answer this question for my wife.
They are, but not enough. I will say that not as a salesperson at a hop company. It's because I actually believe it too. It's you see it out there in ciders and kombuchas. Those are most prominent because you actually see from Brew Doctor and Incline Ciders, they actually advertise that their ciders and kombuchas are dry hopped, or have other hop products. I think Incline actually uses our Spectrum product in it now. And it's because either they want the cachet of this is a non-IPA IPA, but an IPA is what dry hopping is, or literally, which is the case of some companies, they add hops without really emphasizing the fact that there's hops, because the hop component itself is making the flavor better. It's taking whatever they're using to have a blueberry or an apple or whatever and making it natural, making it more intense, making it just something that's more palatable and better to sell.
I see. Yeah, interesting. So like some of those, what is it? Grassy is the word that comes to mind, but it's not that. It's that resinous character, that vegetative character, that like slightly bitter but not bitter aroma that tastes like fruit, right? It tastes like when you're eating fruit versus when you're like drinking concentrated fruit juice, or something along those lines. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah, there's a whole host of the major aroma components in hops, the sesquiterpenes, the monoterpene oxides, alcohols, and all those things, especially the esters and lactones and ketones. All of these are found in various, fruits and vegetables and flowers and things like that. But when flavor houses go to make their flavors, they reduce it down to a cheap 3 to 5 aroma components, and it's missing out the rest of that holistic flavor volume that kind of just makes everything better. It's a scaffolding for them to build other flavors on top of. Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. Maybe for some people too that are chefs, right? Like pure vanilla versus vanilla extract, right? That vanilla extract's close, but it just can't touch there's thousands of compounds, in vanilla. Same thing with hops. There's thousands of compounds. Okay, so we've got these liquid hop extracts available. Why are brewers still using pellets? Like, do pellets offer something that these extracts don't?
I think there's a lot to be said for tradition, and don't break something that's not broken, so don't fix something that's not broken. I think there's a lot to be said for tradition, and a lot of brewers are in that old school vein of, well, this is what I know and this is what works, and we're making great beer. Why would I try anything else? But I think you got to look at it as a toolkit. This is just another tool that can be used, and it depends on what the goal of your brewery is. If you're trying to increase your efficiency, if you're trying to reduce beer loss volumes, all of those sort of things go into it. And so these are tools that can be used to help you reach whatever goals your brewery has. So I wouldn't necessarily say one's better than the other. It just depends on what you're aiming for. And so whether that's a whole cone, a pellet, or an extract, all of those will make great beers, either individually or used in a combination.
Nice. Yeah, I like the way that you say that, right? Each of those work in their own way. It just depends on what you're trying to look for. If it's yield loss or, whole cone material, whole cone sucking up beer, right? I mean, imagine like you've been brewing this beer for a long time as whole cone and then you switch over to something like, Spectrum or Incognito. I mean, that would be just huge in terms of efficiency, I can imagine. But we'll get into that in a little bit. I did want to spend some time talking about history. So any idea where or when hop extracts were first created and used by brewers?
Yeah. I think both of us have a little bit on this, but Jeff certainly probably knows more just as the history buff he is. So I will start with what I know. Hop extracts started to be looked into in the early 1800s. But back in that time, they were using all kinds of different solvents and different things that you wouldn't necessarily want in your beers today. So as we move towards, the next century, around the 20s is when they started finding more successful extracts and using solvents in a successful way to create these hop extracts. And then really it was in around 1965 to the late 1970s is when CO2 started being the main primary extract. Jeff, if you want to take it from there and add in all the stuff I missed, feel free.
Oh, shucks. So it was 1803, Dr. A.F. Galen made a water-based extract where he's basically just boiled down hops and reboiled in order to concentrate out that water. So he made basically a pre-isomerized kettle extract using water as a solvent.
Wow, okay. Yeah.
The 1920s and 30s that Shay was talking about, that was Baron Louis von Horst and his son, Dr. Louis von Horst. They got the first commercial patent in Germany for a hop-based extract, and they were using all those still acceptable food-grade solvents that I just don't want in my beer, like hexane or chloroform or ether or methylene chloride. And those were used commercially for a long time until the 70s or so. Ethanol was also in there as a solvent. That's a nice one. They all have their pros and cons because they all have their own chemistry. They all have their own extract profile in terms of, does one pull out more of the non-alpha components and more oil? Does one pull out more polar versus non-polar? Does one pull out degradation products like pulling out the metal ions that will age beer faster? These are all considerations as we've developed the technologies. And then it was the 60s and 70s when I think it's Japanese brewers and UK brewers, or I should say food technologists and engineers, looked into supercritical, subcritical, and liquid CO2 extraction. This was interesting also around the same time that pellets really first became commercially important as well. So there's a nice kind of parallel engineering innovation track of around the 70s or so in the brewing industry.
Wow. And that's pretty cool. So the pellets and extracts being developed at the same time. But yeah, that's interesting, right? That it sort of came around in the 70s, or I guess increased in popularity, right, in the 60s and 70s. But people were doing this back in 1803. That's incredible to think that people were making extracts back almost 200 or over 200 years ago. So what were these hop extracts used for then? I mean, I guess in the case of the 1803 one, I forgot the name of the scientist, Shay. He essentially made like a super bitter hop water, right? And then I guess used that as bittering for beer.
I assume so. Yeah. I don't know if he was making it for beer or if he was using it in another beverage or any other hop application, but assumedly in the 1803, it probably was beer. Or a similar beverage to what we know.
Are you saying they weren't making hop kombuchas around the revolution, Jay?
I like to think that someone
controversial.
was.
Who knows? Maybe somebody was, but yeah, I would think the soldiers would have much preferred the beer. Although this is post-revolution, but still.
But really, yeah, it wasn't. They were trying to find, like I said, more standardized ways. Higher utilization was really important, and even to this day, that's also still really important, is the increased utilization. And we really saw that it was, for the longest time, it was really only the big beer that was using these extracts. even the craft wave for a very long time had no interest in them. And it wasn't until, like you were saying, the last like 10 or 15 years that it's become something that's actually been accepted in the craft world as well.
Yeah.
But it's crazy to think that as far back, really it was the 1980s that it was really actually standardized. So it took quite a while from conception to use and to standardization before those extracts were really nailed down and figured out.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I did a little bit of research looking into the show, or looking into this before the show, and saw this MBAA TQ article from Carl Strauss from 1986. And of course, I think we can trust that source. And for those of you that don't know, Carl Strauss was I think the CEO, or at least one of the head brewers of PBR of Pabst Brewing Company for like 40 years. And then started the Carl Strauss Brewing Company, which still exists in San Diego today. So yeah, that's kind of a well-known guy. But that's really interesting. So, okay, so we've got, first maybe developed around 1803, and then sort of in the 60s and 70s, we're doing more development. But then, and like you guys said, this was used by sort of macro brews. What prompted this craft revolution? Why are craft brewers now so interested in using hop extracts?
I have to say there's a number of reasons. For the longest time, it was only macro. I think it was Miller Lite, or one of those, was the first extract only beer, as in like malt extract, hop extract, because they were trying to produce a batch of beer like every 15 minutes or something like that. So they get 30, 40 turns in a day, which is insane to think about. But as more and more of those big macro brewers or their assistant brewers kind of left the macro side to help start up craft brewing, they brought a lot of that technical engineering knowledge with them. And it took a while to kind of train their own assistants and get them interested in these products. And eventually, and don't quote me on the date, this is like a hazy memory going back to like college and listening to the Brewing Network. But it was sometime around that time, 2008, 2005, that I think it was Vinny Trilurzo, that very handsome man who makes delicious IPAs.
Mm-hmm,
Hi, Vinny. He mentioned or announced, I don't think it was a big deal, but he mentioned, the reason that Pliny the Elder has so much hop flavor is because we get a lot more beer out of the kettle because we use bittering extract. And then that gives us more beer and more space and a different sort of scaffolding, I used that word before, to dry hop on top of. And that's why Pliny is such an amazing beer. It's like they changed the dynamic. They changed the paradigm by using a product that had been used in the rest of the brewing industry for 40 years. That kind of describes craft to the T.
Kind of. Yeah, kind of. I mean, that's really incredible, though, right? Like Pliny, so I'm guessing if he's using it in Pliny. Pliny the Elder is like, I mean, I'm not going to say unanimously, but it's been one of the top beers in America for, I don't know, a decade, if not the top beer in America. And so it's that beer is made with bittering or with extracts in the kettle. That's pretty incredible. And to think about, like, okay, that makes sense. Somebody like Vinny Chilurzo, Russian River, making Pliny the Elder comes out and says, yeah, I use it. And then everybody goes, oh, okay, cool. Well, Vinny's doing it. Right?
But it should also be said on this front, I know this is about liquid extracts and why they're so good, but Ken Grossman, Sierra Nevada, still the biggest proponents of whole cone use in their hyper-consistent multinational brand Sierra, a little beer called Sierra Nevada Pale Ale.
Yeah, right.
So like Shay was saying, all these products have their own purpose, their own use. It just depends what problem you're trying to solve or what your intention is with your brand.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt that Sierra Nevada Pale Ale is a fantastic beer. I mean, that's the example of pale ale, right? If you look up any style guideline and say, find an example of an American pale ale, Sierra Nevada Pale Ale is going to be one of the top 3 beers that you see on there, if not the top 1. And they use entirely whole cones. So that's a great point too, right? And then, of course, you've got the big guys that have been doing this. And I guess I should sort of ask before we kind of move on from this part, but like, I mean, in my understanding, at least, is the big guys were using mostly bittering extracts, right? They're not looking for a lot of aroma, but they do want consistent, standardized bitterness. I mean, there is aroma in the big beers. I'm not saying that there's not. That's just not the primary focus that they're using hops for, right? For the most part, it's bitterness, or at least that's my understanding. Is that right, or am I totally off base there? Any idea?
I would probably, absolutely on the bitterness, but I think also late kettle flavor is a big one as well. So some of that late late kettle aroma is probably a big use. But yeah, they're not dumping huge amounts of extract into the whirlpool or into, finished tanks. So
yeah, or into fermenters.
That's a little bit different. That's definitely where it originated. And but to go back to your guys' point about craft starting to get interested, there is still a lot to be worked on. I had a colleague, or I had an associate ask the other day, is using extracts cheating? and it's so that mindset's still there a little bit. It still needs to be broken down. And so I think this is really great. It'll help people understand a little bit more.
Oh man, I totally get that, especially in the homebrew community, right? I mean, people always are saying like, oh, you have to brew all grain, you have to do it. Like, don't brew extract. That's just what beginners do. I've had some damn good beers that are extract based. And I'm telling you, about a year ago, I brewed an experiment that actually looked at all grain versus extract. And it was so much fun brewing that extract because I just didn't have to deal with the mash and worry about adjusting water and calcium and all this kind of other stuff. It was just very, very fun to be able to brew with an extract as well. And it was consistent, and both beers turned out fantastic. So I'll throw that one out there and leave it there. But that's really interesting, right? Yeah, people are like, oh, it's cheating. It's not craft if you're using an extract. But no, that's ingredients, right? I mean, I say this all the time. I like making cakes from scratch, but it's so much easier if I can just buy a box cake mix, right? And I don't have to worry about it deflating or any of those other things, or burning or any of those other crazy things that I have to whenever I'm making a cake. That's interesting, Jeff, that you brought up the Russian River around that time, 2005 to 2008, because to me, that's sort of when I remember these hop products becoming a thing. I wasn't homebrewing at that time yet, but I was drinking beer. And I do start to remember like, oh yeah, this has got, I don't know if cryo was a thing back then, but it's got like, what was it? Oh, it was those, the YVH hop shots. And you actually brought this up before. Maybe that wasn't 2005, 2008, but it was somewhere around that time, right?
Yeah, it was about that time, 2008 to maybe more like 2015. But that's when you started to see novel flavoring products like Hop Hash, which was just concentrated lupulin from the production line being kind of swept up and cleaned. But you also saw, based on that, the development of cryo, the lupulin N2 powder that became the cryo pellets. But this is also, and I just mentioned Sierra Nevada, this is the era that they started producing Hop Hunter, which was that double, triple IPA with distilled hop oils added as a flavoring component. So everyone, big to small, were looking at different ways of getting different or more hop flavor into beer as the IPA market increased.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And again, it is interesting. Like Shay mentioned earlier, right? I mean, you've got different needs as a brewer, and especially brewers like that Hop Hunter, they wanted to maximize flavor, right? The whole point of that beer was to maximize the hop character and flavor in the beer. So you're going to need bitterness, you're going to need aroma, you're going to need flavor. And that's one of the ways that they do it, is by using those extracts. I mean, I've seen a whole bunch of beers. There was a whole bunch of beers are prominent with that, oh yeah, we use the cryo hops. I mean, I think it's only going to be a matter of time before we've got like Spectrum and Incognito in there too. People saying like, this is made with Incognito aroma product, or the new Phantasms and all that sort of stuff. I'm sure you guys are working on thiols. Not
That's a different episode, Cade. Come on.
Right, exactly. And not to get you guys in any trouble talking about things that you shouldn't talk about, but I'm sure you guys are working on something like that. It seems like everybody is these days. So okay, cool. So then we've sort of looked at kind of, a little bit. We spent a lot of time talking about history, which has actually been a lot of fun, right? We haven't actually talked about any of the specific products yet, but we are pushing up against a break. So let's go ahead and take a break. We'll show some love to sponsors, and then when we come back, we'll start actually talking about some of these products and how you can use them in your brewery. So we'll be right back. We all know that designing recipes is really fun, and doing it well is so much easier with good software. We at Brewlosophy recently made the switch to Brewfather, and honestly, y'all, we could not be happier. Brewfather utilizes the latest technology to bring you the most robust cloud-based recipe design software that can be accessed anywhere, on your phone, tablet, desktop, and even offline. It also works seamlessly with numerous third-party devices to make it easier to monitor every step of your brew. I know change can be difficult, but trust me when I say you need to go to brewfather.app today to try it out for yourself. That's brewfather.app.
Established in 1995, More Beer has been consistently serving the greater brewing community since the times IPA was expected to be bitter and clear, and there are reasons they've stuck around so long. In addition to their massive product selection and excellent customer service, More Beer has locations on both the west and the east coast of the United States, which translates into fast shipping times regardless of where you live. And when you spend more than $59, shipping is free. When you're in need of brewing ingredients and gear, there's no better option than morebeer.com, one of the most trusted shops on the planet.
Hops are one of the core 4 ingredients in beer, providing bitterness and flavor to balance malty sweetness. And as I was prepping for this episode, I was thinking about those old Miller Lite commercials. Great taste, less filling. And I was thinking about hop extracts. Great use, less hop material. And I feel like there's a missed opportunity here. Your marketing team can have this idea for free. I just want to know, are we going to start seeing these commercials, these Haas commercials at CBC, MBAA, or ASBC? Great usage, less hop material. What do you guys think?
We already do.
Oh, do you?
I can see you haven't been to our booth at CBC. I appreciate it.
I actually haven't. I haven't been to CBC, but yeah.
There's a great giant picture of our head research brewer, Virgil McDonald, and it says "maximum flavor, minimum loss." It's been his tagline for like a decade now.
Has it really?
It's pretty great. Yeah.
Nice. I love Virgil. He's such a cool guy too. Well, cool. Yeah. Well, all right. So then it wasn't me that came up with it. You guys have already capitalized on that. So great. Way to go. All right. So we want to talk through some of these hop products. So what order do you guys want to start with, and who wants to start?
Well, I think we can start with what we were just talking about, like the granddaddy of them all, and then work through like traditional bittering, and then move towards like the future with flavor stuff that Shay's an expert in.
Cool.
So starting with CO2 extract. What is it made of? Where does it come from? Again, mommy hop, daddy hop, meet a supercritical CO2 extractor that pumps.
Hopefully it is just mommy hop that meets the CO2 extractor, not the daddy hop.
You can never be so sure. Right. I'd like to not venture into hop misandry, Cade, if you wouldn't mind.
That sounds good.
No. So CO2 extract can come from liquid CO2, which is processed like a much lower temperature. It's liquid CO2 versus supercritical, which is like 200 to 300 bar, and that's what we primarily produce here in Yakima, supercritical CO2. And it comes out between 45 and 50% alpha. It's a really good yield product. It's really concentrated. It's also really sticky, and that's why it comes in these food grade tins that can then be punched open and submerged into hot boiling wort in order to extract out the extract, because trying to scoop it out with an ice cream scoop just doesn't sound like a lot of fun when you're brewing a 10,000 barrel batch at Molson or something like that.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Wow.
But that CO2 extract is important for a number of reasons. Both it's super efficient. It's also the top of the tree when it comes to producing all of these other extract products. It's the easiest way to get all the components out of hops that we can then chemically or mechanically or otherwise separate out into these other products that we've talked about so far. Also, it's you can, it comes in different varieties too. It's not just generic ISO. For those of you listening, you can look out there for individual varietal extracts. Different people sell it. So it's not just CTZ or whatever.
That's interesting. So the CO2 extract, that's like the start of the process then, I guess. But it's also like probably the one that's been done for the longest. We talked about that. Like that was what was being done in the 60s and 70s is the CO2 extraction. But really, it just makes like a goop that you really just like can't do anything with. I had no idea. I've never used the CO2 extract, but that's fascinating to me to think that you've just got this can that you just like poke some holes in and drop it in the boil kettle and just let it go.
Yep. The big guys call it it's like an automated hop dosing unit. And it's just like a wire rack with cans sitting in it. It's actually really cool to see. I'm not ragging on them at all. It's just I never would have thought to have done that. I would have been the guy with the ice cream scoop. Let's put it that way.
Well, yeah, I'm sorry. I started laughing whenever I was thinking about the can that you just pop open, dropping in, right? Like I was just imagining some guy like leaning over the boil kettle and dropping in, this can of stuff, and that being the automated piece of it. But I was like, no. Okay, if they've actually got a rig and they're probably like lowering it into the boil kettle for time and all that stuff, so that probably is actually automated. But okay, so that's like CO2 extracts, and actually that raises one of these questions that I have for y'all. I always hear you say that flowability is important. Like we always talk about, it's flowable. This extract is flowable. You can use this. That's, I guess, what you're getting at, right? Because it sounds like this CO2 extract, the normal CO2 extract, is not flowable.
Yeah. And that's why not that long ago, we developed Flex. And so Flex is a flowable CO2 flowable extract Flex. We're clever like that. And the purpose of it is, instead of punching holes in dozens and dozens of cans and then lowering a rack down into your kettle, you could just get a drum, turn it over, add a pump to it, and it pushes it in. It's really easy. Or even with our smaller 1 kilogram or 2 kilogram, you just dump it in.
Yeah,
easy peasy, no problem there. But that comes from the CO2 extract, because we take our CO2 extract, we use some different extraction parameters and add back in some oils that improve the flowability. And there you go. You've got a sensory, varietal neutral, clean bitterness in a flowable format.
And I guess so CO2 extracts, that is for bitterness, right? Like you said, you're pulling out like 45% alphas. I mean, that's like the main purpose of this. And also for Flex too. It's bitterness, right?
Well, we can get into that. Because again, CO2 is an excellent solvent, so it is pulling out a lot of oils.
Okay.
And it's depending how normally the CO2 extracts are used for bittering, but when you use them bittering at the beginning of the boil, then all the oils just kind of boil out and create a little bit of kettle character. You don't want to put that super sticky stuff in your whirlpool, coming from those cans of CO2 extract, because that becomes a pain to clean.
Yeah.
However, well, We'll get to that with incognito. I'll use that as bearing the lead a little bit.
I like the tease. Yeah.
But also from CO2 extract, we can distill out oils from that, and then I'll go into some other products later. But also, it's just, like I said, chemically, it's a great base to produce all these other advanced bittering products. We take it, we rinse out the alpha acid, and then either reduce it or hydrogenate it in order to produce these advanced tetra and hexa and rho products that are light stable.
Yeah.
And some of them, like tetra and hexa, improve foam stability. Rho is super soft, and it's actually a really pleasant bitterness. But it all starts back with that CO2 extract. Mm-hmm. Off that chain as well, we've got these advanced alpha extracts. There's still the beta and the oil left over that's that other 45 to 55% that's in there. Mm-hmm. And so that produces something called BAO, which is beta acid with oils. And it's concentrated. It's probably similar to what Steiner produces with their Salvo, where it's 0 to low bitterness and a lot of varietal hop character. There's still value in that product, and we're finding ways to use these different downstream products, and customers are wanting them.
Interesting.
Yeah, and then I think the last on this kind of more traditional macro brewer-ish light stable side, I mentioned Rho, which is reduced isoalpha acid. Related to that is our new product, Kettle Ready, which I think you've been shilling for us quite effectively.
Yes, I have.
For that. And Kettle Ready is it's exactly what it says. It's a format of Rho, which is Rho's traditionally dosed in post ferment to adjust bitterness and things like that. Kettle Ready, added on the hot side. It's also got hop oils in it, so you can add it late kettle. You get that sort of traditional kettle hop aroma profile of sesquiterpene oxides, a little spice, a little wood floral, that sort of thing. But you also get 100% light stable bitterness from the Rho that you added in.
I see. And okay, and that makes sense, right? Like tetra, hexa, and Rho, those are products that I've used. Well, I've used tetra and hexa. I haven't used Rho, but tetra and hexa, I used them, and we used those like after the fermentation, like you said, like dosing. We were actually doing it for foam, not for bitterness. For improved foam stability. But Kettle Ready is sort of okay now. So now you've got this Rho product that you can put, a light stable bittering product that you can put into the kettle. Can you not put tetra, hexa, and Rho in the kettle, or is it just more difficult to do that?
You can. It's just you don't need to.
You just don't need
to. They're liquid. They don't require any thermal or chemical modification. So that's why they're really useful as a bitterness modulator or modifier, in the bright tank.
I see. And what about Flex? That goes in the kettle too, right?
Yes, it's still alpha acids that needs to be isomerized.
Ah, okay. Here's something I think I just learned. So Flex is alpha. It's not isomerized, but tetra, hexa, and Rho and Kettle Ready. Well, let me back up. Tetra, hexa, and Rho are isomerized, and that's why you just can add them at the end of at the end, right? You don't need to isomerize the alpha acids. Flex is alpha acids. That's the difference between tetra, hexa, and Rho. So what's Kettle Ready?
Kettle Ready it's Rho. It's Rho isoalpha acid with added hop oil components to get that kind of hoppy character. So it is specifically made to be added on the kettle side, unlike its parent, the row resin extract.
Yeah. So Kettle Ready is also going to give you, like you said, kettle hop aroma.
Yep, exactly.
Oh, totally. Wow. Okay. Dots connecting for me finally, to understand the difference between those. Is there aroma from Flex as well, or
it provides some degree of neutral hop character is what we say about it, because there is a kind of major hop oil component in there that helps with its flowability. So it does provide something different than, say, Pike, which is a pre-isomerized kettle extract, which we didn't even get into.
Yeah.
We do sell CO2 extract that it is all ISO, but it's not reduced or hydrogenated like Tetra or Hexa or Rho.
I see. Yes. And so you do sell pre-isomerized. Like pre-isomerized would just be the pellets themselves are pre-isomerized before they go through the CO2 extract process.
Either or, they can be, or they, in a chemical modification tank, we can add in the same, magnesium oxides or what have you, at the appropriate temperature and hold it for the time where it becomes, isomerized.
I see. So there's sort of a neutral hop profile. You're going to know that hops were added. It's not like if you just dosed pure iso alpha acids in there or something. You're going to know that it's hop because there's some hop oil. But for the most part, you're not going to be getting like a tropical bomb or, grapefruit or anything like that from Flex or Kettle Ready.
Not yet.
Not yet. I like it. I like it. Okay. So that makes sense then. So you've got these. So I guess that's kind of a suite of bittering products, but that's cool that Kettle Ready kind of sits in this like middle space between like, hey, you can use this to add bitterness, but it is also going to give you kettle hop aroma. The things like you said, I think you said like spicy, woody, herbal, those sort of flavors, which are really nice to have. And that's something I feel like a lot of brewers are forgetting about. As we went over to hazy IPAs and Whirlpool, it's like, hey guys, there's still a lot of stuff that goes on in the boil that makes really nice, really well-rounded, good-tasting beers, and that's kind of where Kettle Ready comes back and is like, hey, don't forget about the boil hops, and here's a product that you can use to do it. All of these things too, since they're concentrated, I'm assuming that the dosage rates are much lower than T90 pellets.
Yeah. I mean, if you're trying to bitter with either pellets or these products, you just dose them. Well, Shay can tell you like why you dose them or how you dose them, but it's the alpha content, right? Do I have that right, application specialist?
Yeah. So, the products that you talked about, Flex and Kettle Ready, they have standardized alpha contents, and they're going to be a lot more than your typical pellet or your just regular CO2 extract. So you'll get a pretty high utilization. For Kettle Ready, you're looking at 45 to 55% alpha utilization. Wow. And so you can just base that dosage off of how many BUs you're looking for. And then similarly with Flex, you'll have about an increase in around 10 to 20% compared to just T90 pellets in your utilization. So you'll want to dose about 6 grams per every BU you want per barrel, or every 10 BUs you want per barrel. Huh. So yes, you need significantly less than you would have like a T94.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, thinking about those numbers, I mean, even that utilization is pretty interesting, right? I just did a episode with Dean Hauser talking about using spent hops in the kettle, and utilization was a big part of that, right? And I mean, most brewers are getting around like 30% is great, utilization. And so it sounds like with these products like Flex and Kettle Ready, I mean, like I said, 30% is awesome, but then 40 to 45, or 40 or even 50% utilization, that's amazing. And again, these don't contain much hop material, right? So you're not putting all the leaf material, even in pellets, right? There's less than there are in whole cones, but you're not putting any of that leaf material in the kettle.
It's not even just less, it's none. So both Kettle Ready and Flex, they don't have any vegetative matter. So you're not going to have that beer loss in those huge true piles.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's cool. Like, do y'all have, I mean, I don't think you guys prepped for this and I didn't warn you about this question, but do you have any idea like what the increase in yield would be? Like if you use this versus a normal T90, like, are you talking like, I don't know, an extra 10% out of your kettle or, in terms of, wort that's coming out of the kettle? Any idea on that?
I don't know if there's at least for like Flex and the beginning of the kettle products, there's not that much difference in terms of, the amount of hops that you're putting in anyways.
Sure. Yeah.
I know I'm saying that wrong, but I think Shay's about to get into incognito, and that's where the dividends really pay, because that's where you're loading up a whirlpool with a lot of hops for flavor, and that's where you really start to absorb, right?
I see what you mean. Yeah, because you're not adding a whole lot of T90 pellets to bitterness anyway, at least in terms of like when you're comparing it to dry hops, right? I mean, or whirlpool, you're adding a crap load of hops in those places. So there's not as much material to soak up, but there probably is some. So who knows what that is in terms of the kettle ones, but we've been talking about them and alluding to them enough. So let's jump into incognito spectrum and these I'm going to call them flavor and aroma extracts. Is that a good way to describe them?
Yeah, definitely. So we'll start with incognito, and to hit on your point there about how much more efficient these are in terms of beer loss is that, what we've found through different studies is that a kilogram of hop matter can absorb up to 10 liters of wort for beer. So if you're dumping big old loads in to your whirlpool of hops, that's a lot of potential beer loss just by that absorption. So with these extracts and stuff, we can really, really reduce that and increase your yield. So incognito was released, I think, in 2019. We currently have 8 varieties available of that, and it's a really fun product. It goes straight into the whirlpool and adds that whirlpool flavor for you.
Wow. Yeah. I think if I remember correctly, I think one of the first episodes of the Brew Lab was talking to Marshall Laguerre, who's no longer there with you guys at Haas, but talking to him about using incognito. And I actually have an upcoming episode with Michael Fescher, who was doing an incognito research paper here at Oregon State that I think he did with you, right, Jeff?
Yeah. That was a great study. I know Michael will do the paper a lot of honor. It was a real pleasure to actually work with him, and he totally deserves that Narcisse award they just got this last year.
I know, which is really cool.
Guy's a genius.
Yeah, and that's cool. And I will mention this on that episode with Michael. He got a Narcisse award for having the most read paper in Germany, most read technical publication in Germany, which is pretty awesome. So that's pretty cool. But anyway, so back to incognito. So incognito was a whirlpool edition. So you're doing this. So again, you're adding this for flavor, and is it the same CO2 extract, or like Jeff mentioned it's sort of processed? What's the processing step that gets us there?
Yeah, so incognito, like you said, it's that intermediate, it's that flavor aroma extract family, and it's the first one in a line of a lot of research that we're doing. What incognito is, it's just CO2 extract. It is a very natural, very clean label CO2 extract of hops. It's just that, our team at the extract plant are wizards. They just found a way to change the parameters of supercritical extract of the process. Just, move the numbers around in such a way that now incognito is flowable compared to most CO2 extracts that are hard, like, caramel. That's really what it comes down to.
Okay, I see. And then so we mentioned that we would use it in the whirlpool. So like, what's the application here, Shay? Like, what's the dosage and usage there? And I think you mentioned there's 8 varieties. If you know those off the top of your head, that'd be great to share as well.
Yeah. So it is variety specific. We've currently got 8 varieties right now, which includes Citra, Mosaic, Eldorado, Equinaut, Sabro, HBC 472, and Centennial and Chinook. So quite the list there, versatile list for us. But incognito is great. It's variety specific, like I just said, and then it is, as Jeff was saying, our wizards were able to make it flowable. So it's really easy to dose, and you don't need any sort of special equipment, and the cleanup is not as terrible as those ice cream scoops or throwing those cans into the kettle. I at least spent one time having to get into the kettle to fish those things out, so I wouldn't recommend it. But there's no vegetative material, again, like I said, so you're really not going to have those huge true piles in your whirlpool be building up.
Yeah, and I guess I asked this question a little bit earlier about like efficiency for the kettle products and for the bittering products. Have y'all done research to figure out like what kind of improvements or what kind of yield you can expect with incognito?
So definitely with with the Incognito, we have a dosing recommendation starting out around 50 to 200 grams per hectoliter. But because there is no vegetative loss, if you harken back to that, about 1 kilogram to save about 10 liters, just depending on what usage rate you're using it in that whirlpool, you'll have a really relative beer reduction in that loss.
I see. So it's like, whatever you're using, right? If you're currently dosing it, I don't know, 5, 10, 20, 100 kilos, whatever your rate is, if you figure per every kilo of hops, you're losing 10 liters of wort, that's the increase in efficiency that you can get from using Incognito.
Yeah, just depending on your replacement rate.
Nice.
And typically on a sensory side, what went into the development process is roughly a replacement rate of 1 to 6. So 1 gram of Incognito per liter compared to 6 grams of pellets.
Okay.
And that's found to get, a similar flavor profile on a Whirlpool only addition of pellets versus extract, but also about 15, depending on how you want to measure aroma intensity, about a 15 to 25% increase in aroma potency compared to the pellets, when you dry up on top of that.
Okay, so that was going to be my next question, right? Is we talked about adding this to the Whirlpool, and the purpose of adding hops to the Whirlpool is you get a little bit of bitterness, but mostly it's about flavor and aroma. So is it the same, right? Like if I add Incognito to the Whirlpool, does it taste the same as adding T90 pellets? Or are we talking about this vanilla extract versus pure vanilla thing? Like how close is it?
It's a match. Like that's one of the reasons that we released it, is that we were able to prove, with the way that flavor is extracted in the Whirlpool, Incognito, and your listeners can look up actually Marshall Laguerre's, I think it's the World Brewing Congress paper on oil transfer efficiency, where he goes into how mosaic oil transfers out in Incognito versus pellets. It's just a lot more efficient. But the flavor profile is the same as the underlying hops themselves, because CO2 extraction is such a good holistic natural extraction process.
Oh, that's so interesting, because again, I think of CO2 extraction as just being for bitterness, but it's not. You've got all these other compounds in there too, and you've sort of identified this and figured out we can use these other compounds. So if I'm using Sabro Incognito in the Whirlpool, and assume I'm following the right the right dosage rates, then that's going to taste exactly like Sabro T90 pellets in the Whirlpool.
Yeah. And just like with Sabro breaks the curve for everything. So actually its replacement rate is probably even higher.
I love that hop. That's a great hop.
And then one more thing to keep in mind with Incognito, though, when you're dosing it, is that your alpha utilization is going to be a lot lower, right? Because most of the time you're not trying to get a whole bunch of bitterness in your Whirlpool. So there's going to be a lower utilization compared to regular pellets for the Incognito products.
Are you still going to get some bitterness from Incognito?
You sure will. It'll be about 2 to 10% so there's about 40 to 55% constant, like in Incognito, but you'll only get about 2 to 10% of that utilization.
Oh, interesting. Okay. That's an interesting question. I'm wondering how you guys managed to do that, or is that just sort of a natural product? You guys probably don't have to answer that, and if there's some, proprietary information there, but that's pretty amazing. So you do get some bitterness from Incognito, but not as much as you would get from T90 pellets. But that's also kind of this whole standardization thing, because I know people struggle figuring out how much bitterness you're going to get when you add pellets to the Whirlpool. And I mean, there's not a lot of good calculators out there. There's a couple of papers that have looked at trying to figure this out, but there's not a lot of good information that says like, hey, if I add, 10 grams per liter at the Whirlpool, well, that's a lot to add in the Whirlpool, but if I had like 5 grams per liter in the Whirlpool, what kind of bitterness? Am I going to just like suddenly have a West Coast super bitter IPA when I'm trying to get a hazy? But with Incognito, that in advance, and you can standardize it, right? You know what sort of bitterness you're going to get and what flavors. Is that right?
Exactly. Yep.
Nice. Okay. And then you guys have another product called Spectrum. And what's the difference between Spectrum and Incognito?
So the main difference between Spectrum and Incognito is application point. So Incognito was designed for the Whirlpool, whereas Spectrum is designed as a dry hop replacement. Okay. So you're added straight into the fermenter when you have just a few degrees of Play-Doh to go. before you're finishing.
So it's all right. So application point. I'm starting to see a theme here, right? Flex, Kettle Ready, Incognito, Spectrum, all having different application points and different, ultimate results in the beer. But Incognito, Whirlpool, Spectrum, Dry Hop. That actually. So then I raises a question. Can you dry hop with Kettle Ready? No, you guys are both.
It's not recommended.
Not recommended.
Brewers are going to brewer. I love them for it.
Yeah, it's not the intention, but I guess you could try
it and see what happens. Okay, and same thing. You might not want to You might not want to add Incognito or Spectrum for your bittering additions. There is alpha components, but you don't want to do that.
I mean, it'd just be kind of a waste of the intention and of those flavors, right? I mean, it'd just boil off for at what cost?
Yeah. So use the product for its intended purpose, right? Let's put Kettle Ready. Let's keep it in the kettle, and let's use Incognito in the Whirlpool and Spectrum in the dry hop. So, okay, you had 8 varieties of Incognito. Do you have 8 varieties of Spectrum too, or is that one still being developed?
It's still in development, but we do have 5. So originally started out with Citra and Mosaic, and then recently have released Big Secret, Galaxy, and Eclipse.
Ah, nice. Ooh, the Australian ones. Yeah. I remember the shipping costs there too, right? Increasing those shipping costs.
We want to. The demand for those flavors are there, so we want to supply them.
Yeah, for sure, exactly, right. I mean, and again, it's not just about shipping, right? I mean, those are really unique hops that add a lot of flavor that are sometimes challenging to find in the United States. And that may be a product of shipping, but it's also just a supply issue too. So that's really cool that you guys are doing that. So Spectrum, then, what's the dosage rate and usage for Spectrum?
Yeah, so Spectrum, we recommend a replacement rate of about a 1:5 to a 1:8 replacement ratio. So for what that means is basically if you have 1 kilogram of Spectrum, you can replace around 5 to 8 kilograms of pellets, of your T90 pellets.
Wow. Okay. That's a lot too, right? I mean, wow, that's a big savings. I mean, I think about, especially if you're doing a hazy IPA where you're adding a lot in the Whirlpool and a lot in the fermenter, then you've saved a lot of material, right? That's a lot of beer that you're getting back that you can then package and sell to consumers. That's pretty impressive. And it's all right. I'm going to ask the same question that I asked for Incognito. When you dry hop with Spectrum, does it taste the same as when you dry hop with regular T90 or whole cones?
It does. And we've also seen that it plays really, really well with others. So if you want to use a combo or all Spectrum, you can do that. So it's really flexible in its use and how you're using it and what goal you have for the flavor that you're trying to achieve.
Oh, nice. Just like you would use multiple hops in a dry hop, use multiple Spectrum products, and they still play well together. They don't neutralize each other.
Yeah, or Spectrum with some pellets. I mean, you could do a combo of whatever you're looking for. Ah,
nice. What about using all of those? I mean, could we brew, like Jeff mentioned earlier, could we brew just an entire extract batch? With I'm thinking, can we brew an extract hazy IPA?
We absolutely can. And it won't be, the hazy part I don't think is there, but you will find that at CBC. Virgil and the boys have a pretty classic one that they do every year.
Okay. Oh, I bet you could do the haze one. I think you're forgetting about hop haze.
Well, no, I was saying you definitely could. We just won't have that at CBC.
Oh, I got it.
Yeah. So with hop haze, you definitely could do the whole extract and make a hazy paler IPA. No problem. But if you want to taste an all extract IPA, it'll be at CBC for you.
All right, that's cool.
Or if you hunt me down, I might have a bottle with me or something.
You might have some. No, that's great. There's an experiment here too, right? Like a brewlosophy experiment. If we could figure it out, like in getting it in the right doses to do, fully extract beer versus like fully all grain, and hop or T90 pellets all the way through. That'd be pretty cool to see like what that would taste like, or even more official, right? Like a university level, and Haas level paper too. That would be fun to see, like if you brewed an extract beer versus one that's just like all grains or all grains and all hops, raw ingredients. That'd be really cool. And it seems like there's a lot of usage for these liquid hop extracts, and there was another one too that I remember reading about. It's just called, is this even a thing? Pure hop aroma?
Yeah. So that's not something that you see a lot of in America. It's produced by our sister company, Barth Haas, over in Europe, specifically Barth Haas UK. It stands for Pure Hop Aroma, like you said. It's comes out of the work of the recently retired vice president or director of research and development over there, Keith Westwood. His doctoral thesis was all about ways of fractionating out different components of hop oils and then blending them to create pure hop aromas. So it's something that's out there, especially for your European listeners. They can find, I think it's even sold at some online homebrew shops in Europe, but there's a couple of different types. Basic aromas like citrusy versus floral versus woody. A couple that are called like top notes that are varietal specific. I think they even make a Citra and a Mosaic where it's kind of a replacement for dry hop in a hop oil essence form. Yeah.
I see. Yeah. So that's more like essence based, right? Like you're looking at like citrus flavor or like woody flavor or those kinds of things, not necessarily totally replacing, the dry hop like Spectrum, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And, because these are such concentrated little, like you said, almost, I wouldn't necessarily call them an essence, but yeah, it's along those lines. You use a really, really, really small volume. So our dosing rate for that is only 5 to 40 milliliters per hectoliter. So really, really small volumes.
So that's like 1 ounce per barrel.
Yeah, something along those lines. Yeah, that's a really small amount for those. So super concentrated, maybe more like essential oils or something like that in that way than like essences. But yeah, wow, cool. Okay, so this is the current state of hop products, right? You've got things like Flex, Kettle Ready, Incognito, Spectrum. What's the future?
There's a deafening silence because there's a lot of things we can't talk about yet, Cade.
All right, fair enough.
But the future is, like I said earlier, it's in the evolution of flavor application, flavors derived from hops, especially, and I mentioned this as well, clean label is so important. So not having a lot of, difficult to manage carriers and emulsifiers, whether it's, hop oil pre-diluted in ethanol, which has its own regulatory problems that brewers face with like the TTB and things like that. No emulsifiers, whether it's tween, span, those chemical emulsifiers, or even more natural things like gum arabic, none of that stuff. We're just going in the direction of just hop oil intended for flavor, clean, can be used in beer, can be used in anything else.
Nice. That makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, continuing in this direction that you're going, because it sounds like you guys have made some really innovative products that can solve real brewing problems, right? Increase yield, reduce waste. I mean, we think about, I don't know exactly what the, carbon efficiency of all of this is, it's a CO2 extract product, but, you don't have the spent hops anymore that are going down the drains that are going down to municipal water processing facilities, or any of that sort of stuff. So that's really cool. And actually I just remembered this popped into my head as you were talking about that. I totally forgot to ask this question because I've heard a bunch of people ask it. What happens if you actually accidentally add too much of this stuff, right? Like what happens if I put like a whole bunch of Sabro Spectrum in like a homebrew batch? Like, is it going to taste gross, or am I going to hop burn, or like any idea?
Well, we definitely like to recommend starting small and building up because there is such thing as too much of a good thing. So yeah, if you dump an entire jar of Spectrum into a homebrew, it's probably not going to be good. But that's the same thing as if you put a 5-pound bag straight into your homebrew too, it's probably not going to be that great either. So yeah, there's definitely too much of a good thing, but we recommend starting small and building up and finding the right flavor profile that you're wanting.
Yeah, that's a good recommendation, and I'm glad I asked that question because that's one of those things I would have forgotten about. And again, listeners are always asking, like, is it like lactic acid in the mash? If I add too much lactic acid, then it's like, oh darn, suddenly I'm in like the 4s on a homebrew scale. It's harder to do that at a brewing, at a commercial scale, but at a homebrewing scale, it's pretty easy to adjust that pH way too low if you add too much lactic acid. So, all right, awesome. So, all right, so the future is more aroma products or more flavor products, more aroma products. But some key takeaways from today's episode: more taste and less product loss sounds like a big one, right? But then also standardization. That was a big takeaway for me too. And Shay, you were mentioning that it just makes it much easier to be more consistent. Come on, we got to talk about that. Spectrum and Incognito, right? One of the other big benefits for those is that it removes some of that year-to-year variation in flavor and aroma, right? Jeff, come on, you dropped the ball on this one.
My bad. My focus is Lupomax, man. That's where my focus on consistency year over year is. But you're right. I mean, the whole extraction process removes some of the variability that comes from the components that are left behind because you're concentrating down to a standardized amount of alpha acid. So use the same on every recipe to get the same bitterness. And then, relatively speaking, the same amount of concentrated oil will be in there. And depending how you're using it, especially with Incognito versus bittering, the oils are going to be more similar as well.
Yeah. And again, like you said, standardizing and making it easy to use from year to year. So yeah, if you're interested in using these products, look at your recipes and processes and see how you can use them. I mean, even home brewers. I mean, a lot of these are available in commercial brewing sizes, but they're becoming more and more available. I mean, some of the smallest packaging sizes are in 1 kilogram packages, which is a lot of homebrew batches, but or not, maybe.
Well, if you go to YakimaValleyHops.com and some of our other distributors, but the homebrew side of Yakima Valley Hops, they're just starting to sell like small little 50 gram or 100 gram things at Incognito and little like ketchup packets of Spectrum.
Ketchup packet, like you squeeze it in to the fermenter. That's awesome. That's another thing too I didn't even think about, but like people are always wondering about like the oxidation that's happening with with adding a whole bunch of hop material in there, or like you said, like trace minerals and stuff that are reducing beer stability. But those CO2 hop products aren't going to have any of that. It's just going to be a little ketchup packet or a little 50 ml bottle that you're dropping in to the homebrew packet. Well, that's cool. I had no idea that Yakima Valley Hops was even doing that, so I'm glad that you mentioned that as a place to look and go and find these things. All right, and Jeff knows this. I always ask this at the end of every show. So theoretically, Jeff has had some time to prepare this. So I'll ask him first, Shay, and then I'll ask you. But it's if you want brewers to take away just one thing from today's episode, what would it be?
That they need to buy more Sabro Incognito, please and thank you. It's my favorite variety. It's underutilized, and I know Sabro it's divisive because when it came out, people used their standard experimental IPA, which is like 4 pounds per barrel dry hop. Sabro doesn't need that. For Sabro, it's like 1.5 pounds per barrel is the same as 4 pounds per barrel, something else. There's that aspect. Also, Sabro on the Whirlpool side, just the way that Whirlpool oil extraction and then the whole survivables through fermentation thing, the way Sabro oils interact with that just makes a much better beer to dry hop on top of it. It's natively potent. It's super fruity without any of the dill or some other components that different people get when Sabro's dry hopped with. I just highly recommend it as like it is the efficient flavor enhancement that you're looking for. That Sabro Incognito. All right,
Sabro Incognito in the Whirlpool. That's Jeff's advice. All right, Shay, what about you? If you want brewers to take away one thing, what would it be?
Yeah, I think I might cheat and say there's two things. So the first one is that, these are all tools. They're all little spices in your recipe kit. If you want to improve something or you've got a target in mind, they can help you get there. So there's no such thing as cheating. That's all hot products. And you can find something new that might be interesting or spark some creativity, then that's even better. And then my second thing is, these things are here to help solve some of your problems, and we want to know what those problems are. Yeah. All of our new research and innovation is working towards solving your problems. So if you have problems, let us know, and hopefully we can create something that'll work for you.
Nice. Yeah. And if you have questions about using these products, I'm sure, Shay's the person to talk to, or, somebody else at or her team, I guess, are the people to talk to if you have any issues with this. Well, guys, we talked a lot about liquid hop products. Is there anything else that y'all wanted to talk about that we didn't get to today?
I mean, Ted Lasso season 3 is coming out soon, so
I know the last season of Ted Lasso. I'm so sad, but it's going to be great.
I know. I'm very excited for Ted Lasso. I'm also very excited for Hop Flavors coming up. So if you can't attend this one, attend the next one. It's going to be a lot of fun. I get to be a guest speaker there, so take that with what you will.
Very nice. Yeah, exactly. And this episode will air after Hop Flavorist this year, but there will be one in the future as long as the hop folks are willing to put it back on again.
Yeah.
And so awesome, guys. Well, Shay, thank you so much for joining me in the Brew Lab. And Jeff, thanks for coming back.
Always happy to be here, Gabe.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right. Well, of course, you know that you can check out all of the amazing hop products that Haas has to offer by visiting johnihaas.com. And it's so hard for me right now to not say that's John, the letter I, HAAS.com, like I do in every episode. All right. Well, but anyway, next week, Jordan and I will be back talking about our experiences with liquid hop products and discussing how you can apply these products in your brewing. The Brew Lab is a production of Brewlosophy, where they who drink beer think beer. Don't forget to visit brewlosophy.com to read about our weekly experiments and other brewing adventures, and listen to us talk about it on our other show, the Brewlosophy Podcast. Thanks to all of our sponsors and patrons that help make this show possible. If you'd like to receive a reward for helping us do what we do, visit patreon.com/brewlosophy to see how you can do just that. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back in the Brew Lab with another guest next week. Until then, think beer.